Today we're going to go over Chapter 1, Public Speaking, Choice, and Responsibility. So we'll begin by starting with the PowerPoint. We're going to go back and forth between the PowerPoint and go into the textbook a little bit. So Chapter 1, Public Speaking, Choice, and Responsibility. We're going to talk about some of the key concepts in this chapter. The first concept is speech is powerful. So let's look at that. In your textbook, it talks about the fact that speech is a powerful thing, that essentially learning to be an effective public speaker can help you change the world. So I want you to think about that concept. Can being an effective public speaker help you change the world? Let's think about the history of public speaking. The study of public speaking began in ancient Greek, and it was considered the art of rhetoric. And rhetoric is the study of how words could persuade an audience. In the modern world, we associate public speaking sometimes with manipulation. Sometimes we think of rhetoric with empty talk. So sometimes we think of people that try to persuade others of something as empty words. They'll pretty much spin their words any way they need to get someone to do what they want them to do. You may think of politicians this way sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, as master manipulators. So sometimes you may have heard the term, let's have less rhetoric and more action. So less just saying what you're going to do and more do what you're going to do. So let's talk about how public speaking can change the world. So Greek philosophers say that speech is a very powerful thing. 2,500 years later, we know that speech and speeches have been used for both good and bad things. We know that in our world, some of our greatest political leaders have used words for powerful things, such as to begin and end wars. We think of someone like Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt, whose speeches rallied the British and U.S. populations during World War II. In the 19th century, Elizabeth Cady Stanton spoke out to make people aware of the rights of women. And then we go to the middle of the 20th century, where speeches from people such as Martin Luther King showed people in the United States how to think differently about civil rights and race and racism. So you think about some major milestones in our country with civil rights, with equal rights for women. You think about things that are continuing to happen today. Would these things happen if you didn't have people at the forefront of them that had a way with words, that were eloquent speakers, that had brilliant thoughts, that were trustworthy individuals who were delivering those thoughts and had a way to move people into believing what they said, into supporting their movements. And I think you see how speech is a very powerful thing. But I think we've also seen through history how speech can be a powerful thing on the opposite side. We've seen leaders and dictators through our history use their words in very dangerous ways. All of us have seen in the era of World War II and prior to World War II, we've seen the videos of Adolf Hitler and his speeches and how he mesmerizes audiences with his words. So, and we see an era of today where we see leaders who have captivated their people and their dictators. But we know that speech can be a very powerful thing. Think about in your own life, as you're pursuing your education, as you're going to be soon pursuing a career, your ability to be a masterful orator, your ability to communicate your beliefs, your abilities in an effective way is going to be a powerful thing for you. The very first step in achieving anything in your career is to be able to conquer the interview process. And the biggest part of that is to be an effective communicator, to be a persuasive communicator. So speech is a powerful thing. To be a skillful speaker is a powerful thing. To be able to get that dream job you want one day, you'll have to be a skillful speaker. There are many instances out there where the most competent employee is not in the job, but The most effective communicator in the interview did get the position. In order to have successful relationships, we know that communication is key to those successful relationships. So speech is a powerful thing. We'll also talk today about the communication process, the public speaking, that speaking is about making choices and about the speaking process. So as we talked already, speech began in ancient Greece. Part of the field is in rhetoric, and as we mentioned already, rhetoric is basically the art of public speaking, and it can be used to change your world, your career, and your personal life. Speech connects us with others. It can provide unity and democracy, and speech should respect pluralism. The conversational framework. So in speaking, there are mutual responsibilities between the speaker and the audience. So what does that mean? You kind of usually think as a speaker that all the responsibility is on you. But when there is a speaking engagement of any kind, when you are having a conversation with someone, if you're giving a public speech, there's a mutual responsibility. You have the responsibility to give your presentation, but the audience has the responsibility to listen thoughtfully, to listen carefully, to be discerning about what's being said. So it's a two-way street where it should be a give and take interaction. As the speaker, you shouldn't just be speaking and be not cognizant of what the audience is thinking. You should pay attention to their nonverbal. But the audience also needs to be very aware of you and be thinking of the speaker. You have to understand the context of the situation, and you have to give the speech effectively considering the context of every speaking engagement. So next we're going to talk about the communication process. So I'm going to go to another handout, and this handout will be on Canvas. That's going to give a little bit more detail to the communication process than they do in your text. So the communication process that I would like to look at is the basic communication process model. The communication process model has basically a sender of a message. You have the person that sends the message, and then you have the receiver of the message. That's very simple. Anytime we send a message, it's intended for someone or multiple individuals. And anytime we send a message, we do what's called encoding the message. Each time we send a message, we determine the best way that we word or phrase that message. So how do we think this message is going to be most understood? So if you're sending a message to maybe a small child, you would choose a different wording for the message than if you were sending a message to an adult. Otherwise, your message is probably going to be misunderstood. So you encode the message to make sure that you are wording or phrasing your message the very best way that you can to make sure that it's understood best. And then every time you send a message, your receiver decodes the message. They take that message apart and they make sure that they are understanding what message they just received. Okay, so that so far seems simple enough. But the message, of course, is the information being sent. The channel is the space in which you choose to send the message. Now, that's something that we have to be very careful with. And in today's technology, the channel can throw our message off a little bit. And so we have to be very careful on how we send the message. So you think about, this is the message I have to send. What's the best way to send it? Is it best for me to text the message? Well, in today's society, that's our quickest option. That's what we do all the time. But that's not always the best way to send a message. Sometimes we text things and we think the wording's right, but it's misread. It's misunderstood. So the other thing you have to be careful of is tone of voice. When we type a message, we think that right way. So you have to think very clearly about the channel that you could email, you could text. So you have to choose the right channel for the early. Guilty of this. Sometimes there's a conversation with someone in a loud, busy restaurant, and they can't really hear what you're saying. So there's external noise outside of you that's interrupting the conversation from happening. Your mom's talking to you while the TV's blaring, and you're distracted and you're not really listening. But then there's also internal noise, and I know this happens to most of us a lot. It happens to us when you're sitting in class and you're looking at your instructor, and you look to be aware, you look to be alert. However, there's things going on in your mind. You're really distracted, your mind's on other things, but there's internal noise that's keeping you from really being focused on what's going on. So internal noise is preventing the message from actually being sent. So what you have to keep in mind is that anytime that communication happens, we have to assume that some of these things may have interfered. As a communicator, you can't just assume that because you sent a message, it was received and it's successful. You have to keep in mind that noise may have interrupted that from actually being successful. And that's where you kind of rely on feedback. So feedback has some functions. Feedback has 3 functions. It has assurance, where you confirm that the message was received. So you might say, okay, did you understand what I just said? And the person would assure, yes, I got your message, I understand. Another function of feedback is adjustment. As the person that received the message, you may not completely know that you understood it. So you would adjust what you heard and say, okay, is this what you're saying? Rephrase it and say it back to them and confirm that you understood it correctly. Or you might provide insight. You might add more detail and perspective to the message, take it a step deeper or further. So keep in mind when you communicate with someone that while on face value it seems like a really easy thing. I'm talking to my friend, they're right there in front of me, I said something, they surely heard me. But they may have something on their mind, they might be distracted, they may be anxious to go somewhere else. So just because the message was sent does not necessarily mean that it was a successful submission of a message. So you always want to confirm to make sure it was successful. That's where feedback is necessary in that communication process. So that's where, as a teacher or as someone giving a public speech, you're looking at your audience for their reaction. So is my audience member engaged? Is that audience member, do they have a look on their face like, I'm not sure they completely understand what I'm saying? Do I need to rephrase my message? Do I need to reword because I don't think it went completely there? So with the communication process, you have your speaker and you have your listener, and you're engaging in your information and your facts, and you're sharing this information. So the public in public speaking, the speakers adapt to the audience. You think about what your audience members' needs are. You think about what their level of information is on the topic, and you adapt your information based on that. You think about their common concerns. Speakers may be part of the public, and then you may focus on your audience interest. So as you choose topics throughout the semester, that's something I always think about. Where are everyone in this class, where are they in the same place? So what kind of topics might all students share in a common interest? So lots of times people may talk about time management or stress or paying off college loans or financial aid for college or a particular career that someone has chosen. So they want to tell us about that, because those are all those are all areas that are shared common interests for the class. So making speech choices. So that's part of kind of where you are in this course. When you are choosing topics, you are going to be making choices about what you're going to do with your speech. So in that, you are going to prepare your speeches. You're going to decide, am I informing or am I persuading? And I'll assign those for each speech that we give. But I wanted to show you This is a checklist, and this checklist is also in your book. You're going to go through these options in your preparation. You're going to talk about how will I structure the speech. And I'll give you guidance on how the organization should be. For your persuasive especially, you'll talk about what arguments will I use. If I'm persuading someone of something, what arguments will I use to support this? What kind of research will be most helpful? How can I most develop my research to persuade my audience of this topic? You're going to have to discern and identify credible resources. So if you're going to develop a speech, you want to make sure that you're supporting it with the best research possible. You're going to determine potential counter arguments. So if you're going to do a persuasive presentation, you're going to think, okay, if I'm going to persuade my audience of this topic, what are some potential opposing arguments that they may be thinking in their head about the argument that I'm presenting? You're going to create a written outline. You won't write out word for word a presentation, and you're going to have notes, and you'll have visual aids. For informing, you're going to determine your role. You are the presenter. So in some ways, you're the expert and you're a teacher. So you're going to provide us the best information that you can on the topic that you choose. So always choose a topic that you're comfortable with, that you feel like you can provide us very good information on, that you have some background information on, and that you're interested in. You'll have organized main points. You'll provide illustrations and visual aids. When you persuade, you'll influence your audience. You'll go beyond just understanding into caring, and you'll go into action. You'll help us make a decision about what and how to argue. You'll kind of go into the full delivery. So the speech process, in preparing, you're going to choose your topic. You'll consider your audience. What are your goals at the end? What do you want to do? Do you want to expand our information on this topic? You want to persuade on this topic? What arguments are you going to develop? What research are you going to provide? You're going to have clear organization. You're going to choose the right word. You're going to practice so that your delivery is polished and doesn't get in the way of the really good work that you put into developing your presentation. You're going to practice so that you can manage your nerves. That's kind of a biggie. A lot of students that are really nervous, the best way to kind of overcome that is to just practice a little bit more. And then you'll have presentation aids like visual aids or note cards. Just remember these things, that the ability to be an effective communicator is very powerful. It's important when you're providing a presentation that you research thoroughly, that you have really good, solid research behind you so that you are providing the very best information possible, that you understand the context of the information that you're providing and the presentation situation that you are presenting in, and that you inform ethically. That means that you make sure that you're using credible sources in your research.